Tucker Carlson interviewed Mike Huckabee, and Mike Huckabee made it very clear that he is like Israel first. It was an absolutely insane interview. Oh my God. I want to watch the whole thing. Let's check this out. All right, here we go.
Ambassador, thank you very much for having us, for inviting me. I was grateful to be invited.
Well, thank you.
I was grateful because I don't like all the name calling. I've engaged in some of it. I want to apologize for that. In general, I don't think people should be going immediately to motive, calling each other Nazis or anti-Semites. I said I hate the Christians.
Well, he is a Nazi.
Be going immediately to motive, calling each other Nazis or anti-Semites. I said I hate the Christian Zionists. I lost control of myself. Of course I don't. I've apologized for that. I have problems with my anger, and so I just want to apologize.
Wow, interesting. Setting the tone for the interview right out the gate, trying to make it, make him feel less defensive. In reality, Tucker is about to absolutely destroy Mike Huckabee. He's going to attack him relentlessly through this entire episode. Also, there was a claim from Tucker that he was arrested in Israel. I don't believe it. After looking into it a bit, I think he's lying. I think he's full of it. I don't think he was arrested. I don't think he was detained. Nothing. I think it was for attention, fully and completely. But okay.
To you, since you are a Christian Zionist.
You and I have known each other for over 30 years.
Over 30 years. That is totally true.
Back when you were in Little Rock. So
yes.
The
newspaper.
It's why I wanted us to have a conversation, talk to each other and not about each other. And I appreciate very much your coming here to.
Of course. And I'm only staying a couple hours, unfortunately, because I kind of shoehorned this in, but I hope that I will be back soon.
He did not kind of shoehorn this in. He intentionally planned this entire trip and tried to contact the military and everything to make sure that he wasn't going to be arrested when he arrived. And then when he did arrive, he claimed that he was arrested. It's completely full of shit.
And I hope that I can come back soon because I actually like, despite what you may hear, I actually like the country. I've been here a lot and there are a lot of things I love about it. And I want to talk to people in it for a week.
Good.
And get a better sense of it. So I want to ask you, everyone I've talked to in preparation for this has said the same thing. Jonathan Pollard?
Wait, in preparation? I thought you said you shoehorned it in. Were you lying? Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case something happens with the government or whatever. It would be really good if you had some way to connect with me and my content. I'm really concerned about that. And maybe you should consider that for other creators too.
I'm just going to throw the name to you and have you explain.
No, I'm glad you asked.
Of course.
Interestingly, there's been a lot of things about it. You're the first person who has asked me about it, which I find amazing. So I'm glad you did.
Really?
Yeah, the very first
Good.
person.
Well, it's better to hear it.
Sure. I met Jonathan Pollard 2 times. Once I was making a speech in Jerusalem. This has been a few years ago. His wife was still alive at the time, and he was there. And someone introduced me to him and his wife. I said hello to them. That was it. Hi. Nice to meet Esther, his wife. And that was it. I went and made my speech and I left. Later, his wife passed away here in Israel. And I sent him a note and just said, I'm sorry to hear about your wife. I remember meeting her at the hotel and sorry to hear it. He then asked, could he come and see me? He wanted to come and thank me for being kind to him. He came to the embassy. I think we met for maybe 30 minutes. We had a nice, pleasant visit. The funny thing was the New York Times reported that it was a secret meeting.
So I was wondering what this meeting was about, who this person is. He's a former U.S. Navy intelligence analyst who spied for Israel. Carlson opened by grilling Mike Huckabee about his meetings with Jonathan Pollard, who was convicted in the 80s of spying for Israel. Carlson called Pollard the greatest traitor in modern American history and claimed he had sold U.S. battle plans against the Soviet Union to Israel, which then allegedly passed the intelligence to the Soviets. Huckabee claimed Carlson was the first person to ask him about the Pollard meeting. This is easily debunked, as Israeli reporter Nira Kraus had already confronted Huckabee about it in January. Huckabee said Pollard was sentenced to 30 years. Pollard was actually sentenced to life in prison and served approximately 30 years before being paroled in 2015. Wow! Carlson's framing of Pollard as a most damaging spy ever is debatable. Intelligence professionals have debated whether Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen, who spied for the Soviet Union, and whose espionage led to the deaths of U.S. agents, actually caused greater damage. Former CIA Director James Woolsey, noted that Pollard did not get anybody killed and was not spying for an enemy. That is interesting. So they mentioned Robert Hansen here. That dude's story is insane. It sounds like this Pollard guy is actually a spy for the Soviet Union. Like he assisted the Soviet Union against the United States during the Cold War, which is a big fucking deal. And they mentioned Robert Hansen. He's maybe the most high-profile spy for the Soviet Union. He was an American who worked for the CIA, I think, and was tasked with finding the mole in the CIA. The cat is yowling. And it turned out it was him all along. He was the mole. He had been passing information to the Soviet Union for years. It was like the biggest intelligence disaster ever. I had never heard of Jonathan Pollard. That is fascinating. And Mike Huckabee says that he's the first one to ask about him, even though he's not. That's really interesting. Okay. So now we know who Jonathan Pollard is. He was a spy for the Soviet Union, effectively, during the Cold War.
The embassy, I think we met for maybe 30 minutes. We had a nice, pleasant visit. The funny thing was the New York Times reported that it was a secret meeting. Tucker, if you've ever been to the U.S. Embassy, you would know there's no such thing as a secret meeting at the U.S. Embassy. Sure. There are cameras everywhere. You walk through Marines, you walk through security, you walk through the front office, and there's a dozen or more people that are going to check you out when you come. And
I think Tucker is right on this, and I think Mike Huckabee is lying intentionally to cover his ass, because Jonathan Pollard is an absolutely terrible person as far as I can tell.
Before you get there, you're going to have to give us your passport information. You're going to have to be vetted and screened and all of this stuff. So the idea that it was secret was ludicrous. The whole idea is, look, Jonathan Pollard did something that was terribly wrong. He sold secrets. He shouldn't have done it. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and spent 30. Actually, I think he was sentenced to maybe more than 30 years, but he spent 30 years in prison.
It was sentenced to 30. He spent less because he was paroled.
Most people convicted of something similar, which was one count, I believe, would have spent 2 to 4, but he spent 30. I don't have a problem with him spending 30 because I think what he did was despicable. I'm not defending anything about what he did, but even people like the former director of the CIA, a number of other senators on the Senate Foreign Relations of the Senate Intel Committee said that he should be allowed to leave and move to Israel if he wanted to. So it, to me, was not as big a deal.
I'm sorry, a convicted criminal who is on parole should be allowed to leave the country? I don't give a fuck who on the Senate committee likes this guy enough to say that a convicted criminal should be allowed to leave the country, but they shouldn't.
That I had this basically courtesy meeting. He wanted to thank me for being nice to him when his wife died. That's pretty much the...
You advocated for...
I bet that's all it was. You're the ambassador of the United States in Israel. And all this literal spy wanted was to thank you for being nice when his wife died. Totally. I believe that without question.
For his release when you ran for, I remember it, in 2011, long before he had served 30 years. And I agree with you that there are a lot of people languishing in prison, in our country and in this country, many countries, for longer periods than they deserve. And I think it's a Christian impulse to want to see them free. But
it's a Christian impulse. It's not a human impulse to want to see people free, generally, to make it to not want, certainly innocent people, to serve the rest of their lives in prison. Okay.
This was the greatest traitor in modern American history who
arguably, yes.
Who sold our battle plans against the Soviet Union, our main enemy in the Cold War, to the Israeli government, which according to our Reagan CIA director, Bill Casey, then gave them to the Soviet Union.
Yes.
So this was the most profound betrayal of the United States in my lifetime. Why advocate for that guy's release before he serves his full sentence?
If that were the case in 2011, it would have been because I had a number of friends that suggested that he had more than served.
Oh, you're susceptible to your idiot friends and you don't look into any of this stuff yourself. I see. You're a gullible sucker. Okay, go on.
Time, and he didn't want to live in the U.S. anymore. He wanted to live in Israel. And
yes, no fucking shit. Convicted, like, spy wants to leave the country. Wow.
And but my association with him, again, I had never met him until I met him in Jerusalem at a hotel. That was the first time I had ever encountered him.
Well, we know that Huckabee lied about the first time he was asked about this. I'm suspicious about the first time he met him.
I'm friends with a million bad people, or I've talked to a million bad people.
I'm sitting here with you.
Right.
I mean, come on.
I mean, she's the same with tax collectors. So trust me, do not judge people who are friends or know or enjoy the company of immoral people, because it's not an endorsement of their immoral behavior.
I just created a new website, firesidewatch.com. You can watch videos with friends, and everybody can play or pause the video. I made it so I could collaborate with other YouTubers, but I figured I might as well make it available to everybody. On top of that, you can add videos to the queue, upvote them, and sort by most upvoted. Give it a look, firesidewatch.com. And while you're at it, check out my Patreon, owenmorgan.com/Patreon. You can follow me there for free. You don't judge people for being friends with immoral people. Are you not a Christian? Is that not like against the Christian doctrine? Aren't you supposed to be wary? A bad association spoils useful habits and all that? That's what my parents used to say to me. Is that stupid fucking Bible verse from wherever it was. It was Old Testament, I think.
Pollard is different, I think, once you become U.S. ambassador, the representative of the President of the United States in the United States of America in a foreign country, and then you invite not only the most damaging betrayer in our lifetimes, but also a guy who continues to advocate for betrayal. So he gave an interview, as I know you know, in 2021 to Israeli media, in which he said, I would encourage Jewish Americans with security clearances to spy for Mossad against their own country, the United States, because, and I'm pretty much quoting him, all Jews should have dual loyalty. That's not repentance. That's not someone who feels bad about what he did. That's someone who's encouraging American Jews to betray their country. That's pretty heavy, don't you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely, most definitely what this dude did, for sure.
I do, and I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think, let's remember, it was President Trump who probably facilitated his departure. And I'm certainly supportive of President Trump. I think you are. And
Pollard's not.
Oh, he's trying to catch him in a little thing here. That's funny. But he says, this guy isn't.
He called him a madman after your meeting.
That's why I say Pollard is not, for me, the real issue. It was the fact that he did something that was despicable. I'm not denying that. Of course he did. And he paid dearly for it, 30 years in prison, and he should have. That's what he should have done. There's no question about that.
Why meet with
That is very interesting.
him in the U.S. Embassy? Your colleagues said they were shocked. They said...
Who were the colleagues that said they were shocked?
Quoted on background in the New York Times. I think the meeting was in August. This could all be fake. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, the same New York Times said it was a secret meeting. And I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a secret meeting in the U.S. Embassy.
Do you see why the U.S. ambassador hosting a convicted betrayer of his own country who's encouraging Americans to continue to betray their country would seem shocking?
Well, I would say that it wasn't that you make it sound like I'm hosting a meeting. I simply met with
He was absolutely hosting a meeting
with him. I meet with people all the time. Some
You can
of
just
them,
walk in without a...
No, they have to have an appointment. Of course they do.
So why'd you take an appointment with a known spy that helped Israel over the United States across like 30 years or something like that and served prison time for it? Why did you do that? That's a good point. You know, I didn't consider that. The fact is, the thing that Tucker is trying to prove here is that Mike Huckabee supports Israel over the United States. And I believe that's true, without a doubt.
Oh, so it is hosting him then, I think.
Well, I don't know if it was hosting, but it was
Damn, sick burn, dude.
certainly he was able to come to the U.S. Embassy to have a meeting at his request. I did. And frankly, I don't regret it. I met with a lot of people over the course of the time I've been here, and we'll meet with a lot more. That's it.
So if you spend...
All right, let's move forward because of this stupid thing. Tucker, really holds the dude's feet to the fire in a lot of ways. It's pretty good.
Americans in prison in Israel, there have also been, and there continue to be, dozens and dozens and dozens of accused sex offenders from the United States who fled to Israel, including one recently.
Yep, that's a big problem. Sex offenders leave the United States and go to Israel for protection. because they have that, what's it called? I don't remember the doctrine, but basically anybody can go to Israel if they can prove some kind of Jewish association, and they will be accepted and protected from anything, pretty much. Yeah.
An Israeli government official who was caught trying to molest a 15-year-old girl and fled to Israel and is not going back to the United States to stand charges for attempted molestation of a child. Have you advocated for the Israeli government to return him to the United States?
I'm not familiar with that case. It has not come to us at the embassy, so I'm not aware. Is this the person in Nevada?
That is correct.
Okay, I
in
heard
Clark
about
County,
it.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I heard about it through open source media. It was never something that was presented to us, but I would have no problem with him being extradited back to the U.S.
You're the president's and our country's representative in the state of Israel, so I think it would fall to you to advocate with your friend, the prime minister.
Yes, if it was brought to him. Mike Huckabee is actually genuinely innocent in this situation. The embassy is supposed to receive requests for this stuff.
Say, wait a second, we have a very close relationship. We're obviously the single largest source of outside funding for this country. How can you take an accused child molester and shield him from American justice, send him back to the United States? Have you ever had that conversation?
No, because the prime minister would not be the proper person
that may be
in
right.
Israel.
Pardon my ignorance. But
that would deal with an extradition. It would go through their court system. And so the prime minister is separate, very similar to what we have in the U.S., where there is a separation of powers. So it would go through something other than the prime minister.
Have you advocated to the courts, to judges, to anybody in the Israeli justice system?
There has never been a request for me to engage in that. I would be happy to do it. If the White House sent a message to me, I do work for the president. I serve at his pleasure. If anyone at the White House were to say to me, would you please go and make a case for it? But probably.
Well, I mean, Tucker isn't part of the White House, but he's asking now, right? You going to do it?
If that were to happen, it wouldn't come through the embassy as much as it would likely come from the Department of Justice at the U.S. in D.C. They would make the request. They might involve us, but they very likely would not.
Does it seem strange to you that people accused of child molestation in the United States are allowed to have refuge within the borders of our closest ally? How that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I would say that
if you've molested an American child, shouldn't you be required to stand justice?
It's an allegation. Let's be clear. One of the things about
innocent until proven guilty, right? Yes, we're not asking to jail the person. We're asking to make sure that he is investigated, which means keeping him in the jurisdiction that he started in.
Our system,
both of these people, honestly, are so weaselly.
Of jurisprudence,
serve at his pleasure. Yes, Mike Huckabee is pleasuring Trump like a young man should.
Innocent until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So if the charges are there, should he be extradited? I would say so.
The charges are there.
Yeah. Okay. So they should be. But that's a Justice Department decision, and they're the ones who should be pursuing it. To my knowledge, they haven't. They certainly haven't engaged the U.S. Embassy over.
Why would the Israeli government harbor fugitives from justice in the United States?
Again, this is not just a one-time thing. This is a massive problem with Israel. They harbor fugitives. They protect all kinds of people from prosecution, and not just from the U.S., but from everybody. It's like way easier to do when the person isn't coming from the United States, because the United States protects Israel no matter what, but they do it for everybody, and it's wrong.
I'm not sure that
there are dozens and dozens and dozens. In fact, there's an Israeli group that keeps track of them that is dedicated, Jewish Israeli group dedicated to combating the molestation of children, and keeps a long list. And you can look it up. And
Tucker, I hope you're not saying that you think the Israelis support the molestation of children.
Obviously, I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I'm saying that the Israeli government shields accused child molesters from justice in the United States.
I'm not sure I could say that that's something that is provable.
That is absolutely provable and objectively, factually true.
I don't know, but I am not aware that the Israeli government is shielding people.
You obviously want to sleep well.
All right, I'm jumping forward to stupid ads. They are absolutely shielding people.
Promo code Tucker. Well, they are, and I'll give you and I just want to make sure that I pronounce this man's name correctly. It's Tom, I believe, Alexandrovich. I think that's right, and I've written it down, but of course my handwriting is so terrible I can't read it. But yes, he is an Israeli, I believe, cybersecurity official who was at a conference in Las Vegas last year and was caught up in a sting designed to catch people soliciting sex from children. He was one of a number of people arrested for this. He was arraigned and charged. And then 2 days later, he fled to Israel and did his first hearing by Zoom. He was allowed for some reason to leave for a foreign country, having already been charged for a attempted molestation of a child.
Was he actually allowed to, or did he just leave? Also, I do find it interesting that Tucker is like making excuses for the people who take advantage of children here in the US, but not making excuses for them when they go to Israel. I mean, kind of selective outrage there a little bit, but okay.
And he remains here now. And there have been many news stories about this. And I just wonder if you would ask the Israeli government to put him on a plane and send him back to face justice for attempting to molest an American child. It doesn't seem complicated.
No, I wouldn't mind doing that, but I want to find out if the Justice Department of the U.S. has already sought to extradite him. Is there anything in process? I don't know.
Why wouldn't they seek to extradite him?
I have no idea. That's a question for the Justice Department.
I have many questions for the Justice Department, like why are millions of Epstein files still classified?
So this seems like a totally reasonable question, right? I watched just a little bit of this. This seems like a non-confrontational question. Why are the Epstein files still classified? And Huckabee is probably viewing this as like an opportunity to take a breather and step away from the grilling or whatever. But no, it's about to get worse, a lot worse for Huckabee.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with that. I've never met the man. I don't know him.
You haven't kept up with the Epstein disclosure?
I mean, only from a distance. I'm 6,000 miles away from D.C. these days, and I'm pretty sure.
Well, you know people who were in the Epstein files, so there's that. You know them personally, and apparently continue to talk to them. So, there's that. That's kind of weird, right? And you barely know anything about the Epstein files? You haven't paid any attention? Like, do you not care about children being taken advantage of here? You don't care about that? Like, I don't understand.
That there's so much
going on. The current president of Israel,
and the United States.
I know, President Herzog.
Knowing very well.
Apparently was at Pedo Island.
Yeah, and the president of the U.S. just dropping that in there.
That's what it says in the disclosures. And of course, we know that the former prime minister, Ehud Barak, was living on and off at Epstein's house. So still living high-level Israeli officials are.
So Ehud Barak was left-leaning, and as a result is like reviled and hated by the existing Israeli power structure or whatever. So they're I already see what's gonna happen. He's gonna pin it on Ehud Barak, blame him for everything, say that he's the disgusting one, he's the problem, right?
Are directly implicated in Epstein's life, if not his crime. So I would think that you'd be following this.
Only I was not aware that there was any connection with President Herzog. I would be surprised to hear that, and knew there was about
there is
the former prime minister, who apparently had a lot of dealings with Epstein.
Yeah. See what I'm saying? There's always this left-wing split. If the person is on the left, then they're the worst human being on planet Earth and deserve no credit or whatever. But if they're on the right, I'd be surprised if they ever did anything wrong. Mike Huckabee is the biggest scumbag liar on planet Earth, practically, next to maybe Donald Trump.
Business dealings, and by the way, I'm not alleging anything, but I mean, it's in the Epstein files, and I don't know that I've heard the current president of Israel respond to it, but he is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island, so that's kind of a big deal. I wonder, considering there are so many suggestions in the files, as I'm sure you know, of sexual abuse, and given that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender, I wonder why the administration you work for would be holding millions of.
Well, the administration he works for is the Trump administration, right? Not Israel. He's supposed to work for the United States in Israel and U.S. interests, but we know he doesn't.
Files, which I believe belong to the public, hidden for, quote, national security reasons. What would those national security reasons be, do you think?
Honestly, I think you've probably got more access to the White House sometimes than I do. You should ask them.
That was a good answer.
Well, but you're the government official representing that White House.
In Israel. and I represent the U.S. in Israel to the Israeli.
Hey, Jagoff, the question was about Israeli issues. Why aren't you talking about Ehud Barak or the other guy? What's his name? Being in the Epstein files.
Government from the U.S. government, but honestly, nobody has presented that to us.
Well, now that you know that
dynamic situation here, I don't know if you know that or not, but there's a lot going on in this part of the world, and
a genocide is hard to maintain, I imagine. Yes,
frankly, that has not been top line item.
Killing innocent children is the top line item, I suppose. Okay, that checks out.
But you're surprised to hear that the current president of Israel, whom you know, is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island.
Had never heard that. Never heard it even in the Israeli press.
Are you going to ask him next time you see him?
I'll be happy to. Talk to him almost every week.
I will be happy to, like you're doing a favor for Tucker, not actual genuine outrage over this fact.
I guess what I'm asking is not simply as a representative of my government or a high U.S. official, but just as like a man and a father and a Christian. How could you resist saying, like, were you on Pedo Island with Jeffrey Epstein?
Right? Yeah. I mean, seriously, these people are fucking evil. The ones that were associated with Epstein and work closely with him. To be fair, it seems to me that Epstein was... People talked to Epstein for legitimate reasons, too. It wasn't just for, taking advantage of children. It wasn't just about that, obviously, right? So their name being in the files doesn't necessarily mean that they were taking advantage of children. But these very influential people were involved with Epstein with more than just, financing or whatever, because he was a very famous financier.
Well, if I'm not aware of it, and secondly, there are a lot of things that go on in the world. I don't question every single person about every single thing that may be alleged about
the country.
I understand all that, but this is the first I've ever heard of this. So why do you expect me to have knowledge of something like that?
Tucker Carlson is never getting back into Israel. There is no way in hell they're ever going to allow him back in.
Well, because you attacked me personally for suggesting that Jeffrey Epstein had ties to Mossad, and you said that...
You think he does?
What's very clear he does.
I think it's likely that he probably did have ties to Mossad.
You think he does? Where do you get that?
Well, the fact that he was in contact repeatedly with members of the Israeli government, including the current president and the former prime minister, and all kinds of Israeli intel-connected people, I'm not saying he worked for Mossad. I don't think we know that. But there's no question that he had extensive contact with CIA.
I think you said it.
He had like an IDF sweatshirt and a bunch of other things that nobody would have unless they were heavily involved with Israel directly, the Israeli government.
It's a turning point event. Everybody knows Jeffrey Epstein.
I said everyone thinks, and it turns out everyone was right, that he did have...
I'm not sure everyone was right or everyone thinks.
Okay, but you said that I was lying, and I don't want to make this about me.
I don't think I said you were lying, Tucker. I don't recall.
I'm just saying... Why don't we release all the files, and then we don't need to guess?
I got no problem with that. Go ahead.
Would you call on the...
Are you hearing this? I got no problem with that. Go ahead. Brother, you are one of the highest ranking government officials in the United States. Government. I guess he's not in the United States specifically. You're a very high ranking official. You're not going to apply any pressure at all. You're not going to say or do anything to try to get the files released. You're not even going to ask for like info on the Israeli people's involvement. As a Christian Zionist, the guy believes that Armageddon is coming and Jesus is going to touch down there in Israel. That's what he believes. And that's why he wants to serve in Israel, because he wants to be there for when Jesus returns. And it's like, do you think that, like, I'm wondering if he thinks that the Epstein files being released are going to further Jesus' timeline or like speed it up or what? How does this affect the Jesus timeline exactly?
Well, because you weighed in on it and said that this was not true, when of course...
I said there was no evidence.
Well, there's quite a bit of evidence, but you haven't apparently bothered to read any of the files. Is that what you're saying?
I have not read the Epstein...
Dude, he's getting fucking bodied right now. Oh my God. He's getting destroyed. Holy shit. Just open mouth, insert foot.
Files, apparently you have.
Well, they're on the internet.
But when you say that that everybody knows that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent.
That everyone believes that.
I don't think everybody does. I don't know.
Well, everyone knows that he had contact with And by the way, not just Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, which is much more distressing for me. I'm not Israeli, I'm American. I don't want my government having any contact with someone like Jeffrey Epstein. So the shame
I wouldn't either.
is on the United States, as far as I'm concerned.
I wouldn't either. Did you catch that? He kind of said, if I were American, I also wouldn't want that. It's like Mike Huckabee is acknowledging that why don't you just give up American citizenship? Like, you're very clearly working for Israel and not for America, right?
To be totally clear about that. Everyone's very sensitive about the Israel connection, not at all sensitive about the U.S. connection, which I find very revealing. We should care about what our government does first, I think. But since you weighed in on it and said there's no evidence, I'm surprised that since that evidence has been open to the public for a month, since you've already weighed in publicly on this question, that you've made no effort to evaluate that evidence. Why is that?
I just told you I was certainly not aware that there were some specific allegations. I knew about.
He wasn't aware, I bet. Totally.
The former prime minister, but I don't know him. Not sure I ever met him in my many times. You know, I've been to Israel over 100 times since 1973. The first time I came here was.
Talking about Ehud Barak again. We're talking about, Herzog? Yeah, we're talking about Herzog right now.
1973, July. And it's almost 53 years of coming and going to this country. So I know the country well. I know a lot of people here, but I don't know everything, and I don't know everybody, but I do know a lot of people.
Of course, no, and I can see your love for it, and I think that's great. But I'm talking about the U.S. government and its responsibility to, there's a lot of complaint about conspiracy theories and everyone, he's a hater. Everyone's assigning motive. But there's a way to end these conversations very quickly with facts. And I'm highly confused by.
Have you brought this up to the president?
No, I don't work for him. I've said this many times.
I know you don't work for him, but you go to the White House and you see people there. You and J.D. Vance are very good friends. So have you brought this up to them? Because
I have brought
Hey, that's a fair point.
This up in public many times.
It's not on my portfolio, but apparently it's very strongly on your mind, and I'm
child molestation
you should deal
is a significant concern for me.
Well, it should be
Dude, this interview is so interesting
for everybody. But if
there's there is a charged child molester.
But I'm saying if you are very involved in the details of this,
I'm not,
and you think it's the U.S. government that's hiding and shielding somebody, then bring it up to the people that.
I don't think that. I know it. Because the Justice Department has said we have millions of documents we're not releasing.
Why are they not releasing them?
I'm asking you as a U.S. government official.
Well, but
what the answer?
I'm a government official at the embassy in Jerusalem.
But you're a U.S. government official. Huckabee has completely given up on working for the U.S., hasn't he? He fully works for Israel. This is insane.
That has not one thing to do with the Justice Department and what they're investigating on any given day.
Again,
unless it involves...
And I don't want to argue or talk in circles, but you were the one who brought it up and said it's absolutely not true.
I was only responding to what I've heard you say.
Okay, but now that you know there's evidence and we can settle this debate, you haven't looked at the evidence and you're not pushing for the release of the total corpus of evidence. And I'm confused because I want to believe that your goal is to get to the truth, and the fastest way to do that is by releasing the evidence.
I can see that Tucker's a pocket square man. You see his little pocket square there?
Don't you think?
You suggest...
Oh, hey, check it out. Mike Huckabee is also a pocket square man.
Get to the truth, and the fastest way to do that is by releasing the evidence. Don't you think?
You suggest that I can release the evidence?
I'm suggesting that you could call for it right now.
Well, fine, call for it. I would let's have.
No, brother. We weren't saying that you should call for somebody to call for it. We were saying you should call the White House and tell them to release it. Okay, this isn't like Michael Scott walking out and saying, I declare bankruptcy. This is an action that you can take right now.
Have it all open. I thought it was being all opened up for everything I...
Once it's open, I hope you'll read it because it's really interesting, and then it puts to rest a lot of the...
Is this for real? Was he really arrested? No, I don't think he was arrested. I think he lied. I think he made it up. I have no reason to believe that Tucker was arrested, and Tucker likes to make shit up all the time. So, no, I don't believe that.
Debate, and it ends the name calling because we can say, here it is right there. And we don't have to call people names. We can just assess the documents. Let me ask you.
But you bring it up. I hope you will bring it up to people at the White House.
I'm bringing it up right now. I'm bringing it up now, and I'm...
That's so funny. Each person is trying to pin it on the other. Tucker's trying to pin it on Huckabee, and Huckabee trying to pin it on Tucker.
Asking, I just want to say this one last time, as the U.S. ambassador to Israel, I hope that you will make a formal request to the Israeli government to send every accused sex offender in this country back to the United States to face justice. And I don't understand why that hasn't been done. I'm confused.
Well, we'll try to clear up all the confusion that we have.
Well, if someone's been accused of trying to molest a child, I think it's...
Then certainly, and I'll check with the Justice Department because it is a DOJ issue and it would be handled through DOJ, the U.S., to the court systems in Israel. That's how it would be handled.
He's totally correct in saying that, like, the U.S. ambassador doesn't have direct control over what happens here, but he does have sway. Like, he can make requests for things, right? And he's not at all.
But the first step is the Israeli government saying, yes, we will allow you to extradite this person back. The person is being shielded by the government. That's why the person's here. That's why he fled here, so he wouldn't have to stand trial for trying to molest a child. I want to get to as I said at the outset, I said something awful that I regret that my wife barked at me about. I lashed
She barked at you?
out at Christian Zionists and evangelicals, and I just want to say again that I'm sorry. I've always liked them because they're pro-life and they're also really nice people. So for the third time, I'm sorry that I said that. I think part of my problem was I don't understand the theology, and you are...
This is one of the most interesting parts. I don't think I made it this far into the interview. I'm always interested in the way that people rationalize their positions.
Are not a fake Baptist minister. You're an actual minister. You had a church for many years. You're an actual theologian. So, and I mean this with sincerity. I hear people say, those who bless Israel will be blessed. I know it's a reference to Genesis. I don't understand the connection between that concept and modern Israel and the geopolitical world. And so I'm going to stand back and
well,
ask
let's
you
first define, because, from my days as a debater in high school and college, one of the things I knew, you didn't start the debate till you defined the terms.
Amen.
Let's define the terms.
Thank you.
What is a Christian Zionist?
Okay.
What does that mean to you? What does it mean?
I don't know. It's the people who call me a Nazi for asking what Israel means. I mean, that's kind of my...
Oh my God, dude. It's so stupid. Tucker, you are a Nazi, okay? Those people are calling you a Nazi because you are a Nazi. But aside from that, Christian Zionists are people who believe Jesus is going to touch down in Israel and Armageddon is going to take place right there in Israel. And that the U.S. has to support Israel no matter what, above all else, because that's where Armageddon will start and everything else.
Yeah, but here's the point. If you say a Christian Zionist is a person who has a brain virus and is guilty of heresy, that's a pretty big charge.
I know. I shouldn't have made it. I made it out of anger and ignorance.
So,
and I'm
Christian, I think we can agree, is somebody who follows Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
Has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, believes in his death, burial, resurrection, has repented of one's sins, and have accepted him as one Savior. Would that be fair?
Amen.
Christian. Define that. Zionist. A Zionist simply...
They're not separate terms. Christian Zionist is a package deal. It is a Christian that wants to encourage Israel to start a world war, basically, because that's like sparking Armageddon.
Means a person who believes that the Jewish people have a right to have a homeland where they have security and safety. Did you believe that the Jews...
That is not Christian Zionism. Come on, you know better.
...have a right to live in Israel? Do you believe that Jews have a right to live in Israel? That would be a Zionist. That's all a Zionist is.
I have a million questions about what all of those terms mean.
Yeah.
But conceptually, I wish Israel no harm. I don't want to see...
Do you want them to have a place where...
I don't think Israel has a right to that land at all anymore. I think that a lot of people talk about like a one-state solution or a two-state solution. I think my solution, if it were up to me, would be a federal government over the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel, with a Senate and a House apportioned according to, population and everything else, similar to the United States. And if the Gazans want to live in Israel, they have to live under that state's law. And if Israelis, say with settlements, want to live in the West Bank or in Gaza, they have to live under that state's law. And the federal government, with a federal constitution, will dictate the boundaries of the states and things like that. And I think that doing something like that would have to be imposed upon the Israelis. They wouldn't do this willingly. And it would be a big mess, honestly. Hopefully not a bloody mess, but it would be a mess. And I think that we could do it if we just kind of imposed a little bit of pressure. But, Joe Biden was a Zionist, or is, I guess. And all of these other people, they're all Zionists in the country, in the government in the US, by and large. And that's a problem. Getting anything done on Israel is a problem. The reason I would want something like that is because it's a one-state solution that represents ethnic and geographic boundaries, so that one group does not overtake another group, and that killing or genociding this group wouldn't benefit the other group in any way. I would also take the military away from Israel completely. They have no right to a military. It would be in federal hands fully. You have lost your right to have a military with how fucking insane you are. And I would create integrated militaries made up of integrated units. That's how I would do it. I put a bit of thought into this. It would probably take 10 years, longer than the amount of time a president has to get something like this done. And it would spend all the political capital. But it's the only way peace in the Middle East will be achieved without an apartheid state.
They can live with safety and security?
So I saw this recently in an extremely telling exchange between the lieutenant governor of Texas, who I know and I've always liked, and a woman I don't know, never met, who's on the Religious Liberty Commission or something. And she said, I'm a Catholic, but I'm not a Zionist. And they had this ferocious exchange. And he kept saying, and everyone on the panel seemed to keep saying, you have to believe in Israel's right to exist. I've never kind of questioned, just for the record, but it...
Yeah, I would support their right to exist as an independent state within a federal government, like Virginia and West Virginia, the West Bank and Israel, and then Gaza as New Jersey or something.
Did raise two questions I think are really important, and I hope you'll answer them. One is, where does that right come from?
I would say it comes from, essentially, you could say it comes from the Bible. I would say that.
No, you couldn't. Because even in the Bible, Israelis were not the first people in Israel. They shared the area with the Canaanites.
It does. But it comes also from a long iteration of historical precedents going to the Balfour Declaration of 1917. It comes from the League of Nations 1927. It comes from the United Nations 1947.
Right.
The Declaration of Independence of the Israel State in May of 1948.
He's describing the events that created the country. We're not talking about that, though, right?
They were immediately attacked. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1956. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1967 by 5 countries. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War. They won the war. The point is, does Israel have a right to exist? They also had wars in 1982 in Lebanon. They've had intifadas, 2 of those. They've had
Lebanon again in 06. I was there. No, I'm very familiar with the modern history of the state.
Okay.
Pretty familiar, I think. And
but a Zionist simply means somebody who believes that Israel has a right to exist. Now, the question is...
Again, I think Israel has a right to exist as a state within a federalized government. But they don't have a right to a military anymore. They lost that right by genociding people with it.
Do you believe Israel has a right to exist?
I guess. I mean, I want Israel to exist. Well, no, but I want to know what that means. So, do other countries have a right to exist?
Well, they do exist.
Do they have a right to exist? You keep saying Israel has a right to exist, and I want to know what other countries have a
legal right, because every international body in the last 100 years has said the Jewish people have a right to their indigenous homeland.
Yes, and governing bodies have said that Ukraine has a right to exist, that, Nigeria has a right to exist. We're not talking about that, obviously.
So that's a legal right. Do they have a biblical right? I would say that yes, but you may say they don't.
I don't know. I'm actually sincerely interested in finding out what you mean by a biblical right. But first, to the legal right, does any other country on the planet have the same right that Israel has to exist?
Well, you could say, does Jordan have a right to exist? When it was Transjordan and the Brits came and divided up the Middle East and they gave some land to Jordanians, and they gave some land to the Saudis, and they gave some land to various Middle Eastern countries, and it was all carved up. And the French gave Lebanon its right to exist. Do they have a right to exist?
Do they?
Well, why not?
Okay.
Why not, he says. That's not what right means. Right means it can't be taken away or infringed. And Huckabee says, why not? Sure. Fuck it. Yeah, let them. I don't care. Rights are not something you don't care about. It's something you care very much about and cannot be infringed.
Every country...
Does the U.S. have a right to exist?
I'm asking you.
Okay, and I'm telling you, I think the U.S. has a right to exist.
Okay.
We came here. We came there. We're in Israel now talking. But does the U.S. have a right to exist? Does anyone question whether we have a right to exist?
I don't. Yeah, but of course, I'm for America. You know,
good for you.
But so every current country on the map has the same right to exist that Israel has. Is that what you're saying?
I think what we're saying is that when a country has established itself and it is following international law, it has been.
But it's not. Israel is not following international law, like not even fucking close, not even a little bit. They are executing people. Like, Israel is one of the most evil militaries in the world, in my opinion. They're horrifying with the shit that they do. Unforgivable, inexcusable. I will never forget what the current government of Israel has done, and I won't stop until these people are in prison with how fucking evil they are.
Deemed by numerous bodies that it is indigenous to its homeland, as Israel is. This is its homeland. It goes back 3,800 years to the time of Abraham.
No, it doesn't, actually. But okay.
It's not that the Jewish people just showed up here in 1948 and said, we're going to...
That is actually what happened. The Jewish Zionist movement started in the late 1800s and was heavily encouraged in 1923. And Hitler actually helped the Zionist movement gather people by signing the Havara Agreement. That's what it was called, the Havara Agreement. And it basically said, if you're Jewish and you leave Germany to go to Israel area, or to Palestine, actually, then you will get to keep most of your assets. That was the agreement. They did that so that they could get Jews out quicker. And the Zionists made that deal in the first place with them to rebuild Israel.
Well, we're going to have some land.
Hold on. So those are two different tracks, and I just want to make sure that we separate them so I understand each one separately.
All right.
So you're saying there's the modern legal framework, and so you said a country that abides by international law has a right to exist.
I would say that is a part of its existence.
Would the inverse be true, that a country that does not abide by international law forfeits its right to exist?
Uh-oh.
Not necessarily, if it has the capacity to stay and
oh shit, he got him. That's good.
Its case known. But there have been Jewish people in this land,
but that's
in this very land, for 3,800 years.
So, but you're saying as the modern nation state with borders and a military and a Knesset and just all the kind of trappings of a modern country, all of which I support, that country has, every country on the planet has the same right as Israel to exist because it does exist. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to understand the concept here.
Well, I think what we're trying to get to is Christian Zionism, and you've taken this way off the road.
I don't know that I have. I don't need to. Christian Zionism.
This is really funny. No. Huckabee got himself trapped in a little corner here is the problem. Tucker didn't take this way off in anything.
It's a separate thing, but I just keep hearing people say Zionism is the belief
that's the fundamental argument that's going on. Does Israel have a right to live in their indigenous, ancient, historical land, a land that has been affirmed?
Yes, absolutely. They have a right to live there, like Israelis, or let me rephrase, Jews absolutely have a right to live there, but they don't necessarily have a right to control the government there, right? But Huckabee believes that their right to control the government goes all the way back to the Bible. It's a biblical right.
Throughout international organizations, a land that has direct ties to the Jewish people.
I just want to know if this is a universal principle. I guess that's what I'm getting at, because if it's not, then it's meaningless to me, because as a Christian, I believe in universal principles. Something is right for everyone, or it's wrong for everyone. We don't believe in special cases.
But here's the question. If the Jews didn't have this land, would the Jews have a right to any land?
I mean, they would have a right to live, but do they have a unique right to control a government? No, obviously not. I don't have a right to control a government.
No, I'm not attacking the Jews. I'm asking if this applies to every people in every nation. Does every nation have the same right to its own homeland, to its own physical land that you say Israel does?
I feel like we're in a rabbit hole here.
No, I think it's a very straightforward question. No, but does that right extend to other countries other than Israel?
But the most important thing that is going on in our culture right now is whether or not the people that are yelling in the streets from the river to the sea, whether that's a legitimate point of view to say that there should not be a Jewish homeland. There should not be a Jewish state.
You'll never hear me say that. I just want to know.
I know you haven't said it, but that's the argument.
It's one of the arguments going on globally. And the United States, has a pretty narrow view, I would say, in our media culture, of what's happening around the world. There are plenty of countries having this debate. Stonehenge is a lot older than the first temple in Israel. And it was built by the same people who live there now. It's the same people. And they are being pushed off their island and outnumbered by people from other places. And so in Great Britain, in Ireland, which is also a country with a nation of people, a race, if you will, that is being displaced, replaced.
Who are they being replaced by?
Immigrants.
Okay.
From other places.
I just wanted to clarify because I was one of the...
Well, just as a demographic matter, it's just like you can look at the numbers. It's not controversial. Just look at the numbers. There'll be a minority in their country. And there are people...
I missed which country? Hang on.
Well, that is being displaced. A country, Great Britain.
Oh, Great Britain. Okay, got it.
Country. And their people have been there longer than Jews have been in Israel. And so they're having this debate too. That's all I'm saying. And lots of places are having this debate.
Sure.
So does that principle apply to everyone, or is it specific just to Israel?
I think it applies specifically to Israel. It applies to anyone who can prove that they have some connection to the land. And
so Native Americans can move in to America, like from, I don't know. So Native Americans can take control of the U.S. government is what you're saying. That's what you believe, right? Mike Huckabee? That's the logic he's using, right? Native Americans can take control of the U.S. government.
Connection to the history and connection to international law. But Israel, I think, does have an
bringing up international law. So if, again...
Well, no, but let me finish this,
yes,
sir, because here's the point. We're talking about Christian Zionism. The idea that as a Christian, I believe in both the Old and the New Testament. Why wouldn't I? I'm a person of the book. There are 80 million evangelical Christians in the United States.
That's really interesting to me that he said he's a person of the book. That's an old term used to refer to Jews who lived in Muslim lands, basically, if I'm not mistaken.
Makes us who we are is our adherence to the Scripture, our belief that the Bible, all of it, not part of it, but all of it, is the Word of the living God.
Yeah.
So if I believe in the Old and the New Testament, I do believe that there is a very specific call to the Jewish people that started with Abraham, and he called them out of what is now modern-day Iraq, said, "Come where I send you." He came. This is the land. Genesis 12:3, he says, "I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you." In Genesis 17, he looks out at the world. He says, "Look, and this is where I'm giving you the land."
I think
and since that time, there have been people living in this land,
right,
connected to that moment of history.
So Huckabee just quoted the verse that says, "Those who bless Israel will be blessed," basically, I believe.
There is a historical connection that is unbroken.
You've said that, and I want to ask you what that means a little more specifically, if that's okay. But first, let me just say that you could say the same thing of Britons who've been there in their land longer.
Is anybody trying to tell the Brits they can't live there anymore?
No, what's happening is...
But they are saying that to the Jews.
Nobody is saying that to Jews. Not one single person is saying you cannot live there anymore. Okay, the two options are a one-state solution or a two-state solution. My solution is a bit modified, where it's like a federalized one-state solution, where Israel exists as a single governing body within a larger federal state, where a one-state solution would involve basically just a single state operating as like with the new name.
Oh, okay. But I just wonder if you would extend the same sympathy or the same principle. You seem like this is, you think I'm trying to trap you. I'm not. I'm at all trying to trap you. It'd be as simple.
He's totally trying to trap him, but it's fair.
As saying native Britons have the same.
I got no problem with the native Brits having their land.
Having the
But
right
my
to
point
their
is, I don't
land.
know
And
that there
so-
is a biblical connection for the Brits.
Okay.
There you go. There's the bottom line. There's a biblical connection for Israel, but there isn't a biblical connection for British people. That means that Israel is the only country that has a right to exist in his mind.
But I would
So
say,
that's what it comes
take
down
that
to.
off the table, and I think there's still a basis for the Jews having this little bitty strip of real estate.
I'm not even
tiny
arguing with
strip
you. I'm
of
just trying to, at all. I'm just trying to.
As you'll find out in a minute, it's not a little tiny itty bitty piece of real estate that Mike Huckabee wants them to have. It's the entire Middle East. He wants them to control the entire Middle East, like all of it. They control a strip of land right now that's about the size of Manhattan, but he wants them to have everything, is the problem.
Understand what it is that you're saying, because it's not obvious to me, and maybe it's an IQ problem, but I'm having trouble understanding this. But let me just go back to just clarify one thing.
Okay.
You've brought up international law at least twice, maybe three times, as a basis for Israel's legitimacy. If Israel was out of compliance with international law, whatever that is, would it be less legitimate?
Depends on if the law and the way it's applied is legitimate. There are some applications of so-called international law that are not legitimate.
I agree.
Look at the ICC or the ICJ.
I agree.
Those are illegitimate in what way? How is the International Criminal Court illegitimate? Seriously. What a psychotic fucking thing to say. You know why I said that, right? Because the ICC, the International Criminal Court, charged Netanyahu with, I think, crimes against humanity, with genocide, prosecuted and sentenced, I believe. He is going to be picked up if he goes to certain countries. Netanyahu will be. He cannot enter certain countries. Technically, as members of the International Criminal Court, I believe, he can't even come to the United States. Of course, we're not going to pick him up and send him there, but the point is that he's limited in where he can go in a lot of places.
Utterly ridiculous. One of the reasons I'm so grateful President Trump and Secretary Rubio are pushing hard, trying to get rid of the ICC and the ICJ, is because they have become rogue organizations that are no
Jesus Christ, dude. Just to say that he wants to get rid of them is insane.
longer really about an equal application of law and justice.
I don't know enough about it to say
It absolutely is about equal treatment under the law.
if that's true or not. But I'm interested that you yourself appealed to international law as a basis of Israel's
Well, what I'm
legitimacy.
looking at is the whole of the last 100 years.
The Balfour Declaration is not exactly international law, by the way. It was
Well,
a
it was
letter, I think.
It was maybe not law, but it was a declaration. It was an assumption and a declaration that was done by Lord Balfour in Great Britain. At that time, this land was under the British mandate, and he said the Jews should have the land that was theirs from 3,800 years ago. It was simple as that.
Right. And I'm not debating that. I'm just
Yeah.
So then Native Americans should take back land also, right? Is that what you're saying? If we're all going to go live on the land that we ancestrally lived on, like ethnic, and do ethnic cleansing of the area, then I guess Native Americans should be ethnically cleansing the United States of white people, right? For following that logic. The fact is, the Jews that live in Israel today have little or no connection to the Jews that lived there 3,800 years ago, aside from just sharing religious beliefs. And even if they did, I don't want ethno-states. I don't give a fuck. Ethno-states are unacceptable to me. I don't care what reason anybody has for wanting an ethno-state.
Because of the victories that Israel had against those who tried to annihilate them. And it wasn't just that they were trying to take a little piece of their land, they tried to annihilate them.
okay.
Not sure what he's referring to. I actually researched this heavily a while back. And there was like a big thing, Nakba is what it was called, in 1948, where they went to war, or 47 or something. They went to war with the Arabs of the area, and Israel was attacked basically by all of the surrounding countries, like 5 different countries. And they were armed secretly and not so secretly by some countries. I think one of the countries that armed them famously was Czechoslovakia, and a bunch of others. Anyway, the point is that they had to fight their way through to control Israel. And I just don't think that ethno-states are good at the end of the day. That's the issue.
And there is still to this day the shouts of from the river to the sea. And Tucker, that means only one thing.
It means that the people who were displaced during the Nakba or whatever have a right to live there as well. That's what it means. But, they're going to, from the river, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Palestinians will be free. They will be allowed to live free, just like Israelis do. That's the saying. From the river to the sea, Palestinians will be free. That means people will get to live in their homeland. But, he's going to turn it into some genocidal thing. To be fair, it does have genocidal roots. Like, some extremist groups say it and intend genocide when they do. But non-genocidal people also say it.
Not the shrinking of Israel, but the annihilation of Israel.
I don't think
that's different.
I think it's about Palestinian freedom, not about the annihilation of Israel. Also, interesting word to use in reference to a country and not a people. The annihilation of the Jews or the annihilation of Israelis, that's bad, very bad. But the annihilation or the destruction or the dissolution of an apartheid state, I'm all for. There shouldn't be an apartheid state, ever. South Africa was an apartheid state that was dissolved. And it's now still South Africa, of course, by name. But the apartheid state was dissolved. And so should the apartheid state be in Israel.
I don't think you can say that you know what it means, actually, because you don't know what's in people's hearts. So why don't we just deal with the facts? Maybe some people mean it.
I know it's in their
that.
mouths. I know it's in their minds.
But look, you'll never hear me say that. What you will hear me say is I'm confused by what the definitions are. So let's go through this. You've appealed to Genesis. Genesis 15 says it's Abram, it's pre-Abraham, it's Abram, receives from God the news that his descendants will inherit the land. And you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. I think
right. From the river to the sea is actually the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. What he's talking about is different. Euphrates to the Nile is east to west, I believe. And from the river to the sea is south to north, I think.
I think that's right. And that would include basically the entire Middle East. That would be the Levant. So that would be Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. It would also be big parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It would be,
Not sure it would go that far. It would be a big piece of land, but
that is actually what Israel wants. They actually want the entire region. Again, they're fighting for Gaza right now, but once they get Gaza, they're taking everything else. This is like a stated goal. They want to control the entire region, basically, that King David controlled, in 1000 BCE. And that's the whole strip of land that exists between Africa and Asia.
Here's the point.
It would be a lot of places that are now countries.
But this particular area that we're talking about now, Israel, is a land that God gave through Abraham to a people that he chose. It was a people, a place, and a purpose. We can look at it that way. Christian Zionism. I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me with respect to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times. Mm-hmm. And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land?
The answer is yes, in Huckabee's mind. Absolutely.
Because you're appealing to Genesis. Yeah. You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
There you go. There's the answer. Mike Huckabee wants to take Egypt and everything. All of it. Maybe not Egypt. Maybe that's the border, but the entire Middle East, all of it. That is some disturbing shit, dude. Anyway, wow, dude, that was interesting. Tell me what you think about it in the comments.